Hey guys, what is up? I am super excited today. I finally got an opportunity to sit down with one of my favorite content creators of all time, Scot Jun, also known as DamnNoHTML. Those will learn he no longer uses that name, but you may know him by that name. Those of you who have been around the community for a long time will certainly already be familiar with his work. For those of you who aren't, he's created a great number of videos about Dark Souls 3 PvP, often from a try-hard perspective. He's a player who's never been afraid to embrace the meta, willing to defend the use of meta weapons and argue why you should be using them. He used to be a very active participant on the Dark Souls 3 subreddit until a certain incident we'll get to a little bit later. He also was a tournament host, a really great player, great guy, very interesting. His content now these days, he walked away from Dark Souls 3 a number of years ago. He focuses on Dead by Daylight. I still love his content. I don't play Dead by Daylight, but I still love watching his videos just to listen to his mind work. I love listening to his insights in video games, and he was kind enough to set aside some time to join me for a discussion, which we'll get to now. Okay, thanks for joining us today, Scot. I'm really excited to have you here. I think I want to start by talking about the Souls series, and then maybe we'll start talking about Elden Ring. So I'm curious, can you kind of give us a background? How did you first get introduced to the Souls series?
It was Dark Souls 1. Buddy of mine, Snake, wanted me to play it, and I was like, all right, I'll try it out. I played, I got to the Undead Burg, and I was like, this game is awful. And then I just stopped playing it for like a year. And then about 3 months before Dark Souls 2 came out, I was like, oh, this actually looks pretty fun. So let me get back into the first one. And then for some reason, it just clicked the way it clicked for all of us. And I was like, oh, I get it. And then I just was just hooked.
And so did you start off playing like primarily the PvE, or did you?
Oh yeah, I didn't get into the PvP until Dark Souls 2 for sure. Because I saw a bunch of people streaming the PvP for Dark Souls 1, and like I didn't quite get it because like the whole Souls PvP is it's a very unique janky experience, and like I was like, wow, this looks really stupid, and it still does look stupid sometimes, but it's endearingly stupid, and I grew to love that, but I didn't like it at first.
It does look really off-putting, and it does look really janky, but it's one of I still have not been able to put my finger on what is exactly so compelling about it. But I mean, like once you start playing the PvP in these games, I feel like there's no other game that can really scratch that itch the same way.
You know what I think it is? It's like a fighting game in a 3D space, except it's the character you've spent time building, so it's got the RPG element too, which is not very common to that kind of genre.
That's interesting. I'll tell you that, like, for me personally, the RPG elements like never really factored into it. Like I never spent any
Huh.
time thinking about the character who I'm building to. It's just a vehicle for PvP for me. So at least for my part it doesn't. But there's just something about that loop of, I think it's like a combination of, it's quick and frenetic, so you don't have a lot of time to think, but there's still a deep strategic element to it. But the strategy almost all happens offline. When you're in the mix, you're not thinking about those things. It's more something you maybe reflect on later. And I think games like that I find appealing.
Yeah, I can see that for sure.
Yeah. So you started playing PvP more seriously, but how did you actually get so good at the game? Like, just as an example, listening to your videos, listening, especially like the narrated thought duels, and maybe we'll come back to those. It's obvious you have like a very deep understanding of these games and PvP, and just like the concept of PvP and how to approach and think about melee combat. So, how did you learn? Like, did you have experience in previous PvP games, or was this something you developed on your own?
It was, I would say, I mean, I've always played PvP games. Like, I've been playing, God, the first major PvP game, I played Dota for like 10 years, but that's not like, it's not the same type of thing. I always prefer PvP in games rather than the whole PvE experience. But I would say I got good at Souls PvP because I got very, very humbled. In Dark Souls 2, I thought, are we allowed to, I don't know how,
Yeah,
are we
yeah,
allowed to say bad words here?
yeah. Go
Okay.
for it.
All right. I thought I was hot shit in Dark Souls 2. I just got partnered on Twitch. I had like, 100 and something viewers, and I thought I was hot shit. I had my little straight sword and rapier. That was like my infamous combo. And then I was like, oh man, I'm so good. So then I thought, you know what? I'm going to actually join a tournament and prove to these guys how good I am. And I got my shit stomped by, I don't know if you know, like Scorebrand,
Oh yeah.
Lyrical Assassin. They destroyed me. And I was like, oh, I'm not good at this game at all. And I think that was the key to getting better is learning from people that are better from you and being humble about it and learning from your mistakes. And I just stuck with those guys for years and years. And then eventually in Dark Souls 3, I was able to kind of go toe to toe with them. So
Dude, that's so funny because that's such a similar story to my journey where I started playing in like 2016 and I thought I was pretty good. Maybe like late 2017, 2018, like I definitely thought I was top shit like you. And then I started playing against some players that were better. And I remember one experience in particular where it was actually one of my friends and he was needling me a bit and he was calling out my panic rolls before they happened while we were in chat. And I'm like, man, this is really frustrating. Like, what's he doing? Like, what does he know? What's he? And I started thinking about it. And right around that same time, I don't know if you know B Dubs, who's a tourney player. He doesn't really play anymore, but he played on PS4 and he played Curve Sword. And he would just absolutely stomp me into the ground. And that started me on a journey of like examining my gameplay and getting better. And so over the course of like a year, I got way, way better. And I actually did a series of videos with like some of the top tourney players and the things that I took away and I was able to learn. But I agree, man. Nothing like that like rude awakening of I'm not nearly as good as I think I am to get you focused on getting better. That's awesome.
Yeah, that whole mindset has shaped that experience has shaped my entire like personality in terms of learning games from everything I played onward, like For Honor, and I play like Dead by Daylight now. It's just my whole attitude has been there is always someone better than you, and there's always something you can learn from someone better than you, and I think that's a really important like trait to have to get better at games.
Completely agree. I think that the trait of being open to the fact that you're not the best and being able to examine your own gameplay in this sort of abstract and like truthful fashion where you don't pile on yourself but you're also open about the things that you could be doing better to be able to analyze somebody else's gameplay. In fact, I was talking to G9 about this the other day. Like that's one of the core skills in DS3 is you fight somebody and you have to quickly assess how good they are because that helps you with reads and knowing what they're likely to do in different situations. And so you have to be able to turn that same skill on yourself. And then once you do, and you are able to see yourself as you truly are, it helps you make reads against other players too. And I agree, it completely changed my experience in the game, and it definitely shaped how I approach life.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that. The whole like you spend like the first 10 seconds of every single duel, at least for me, I spend the first 10 seconds not doing anything, just like spacing, just to see how they react to stuff, and you can tell within 10 seconds if they're good or not.
Yeah, and sometimes even faster. And it's weird the subtle things that you pick up on. Like I know using G9 as an example again, he'll sometimes in his streams, there'll be like a co-invader who's not very good and they're harming his chances for success. And he'll make this assessment very quickly, like, oh, that person's bad. And there'll always be people in chat like, wait, how do you know that guy's bad? And it's like, well, when you're that experienced, you can just tell by their armor, the way they move, the setups they're using. There's just a ton of giveaways that you learn quickly and you can make those sorts of decisions. That's funny too.
Yeah, I think like one of the quickest identifiers is noting when people roll. Like an okay player will roll to dodge your attacks. A good player will like wait till the very last second to see exactly what you're going to do and then dodge it so they can't be like roll caught or anything like that. I think that was always a very important thing to identify quickly.
Agreed. And then I think there's even a step beyond that. So if you're using a weapon that's not easily reaction rolled, like maybe even faster than a curved sword, like a dagger, a good player will wait to try to reaction roll. And if they can't, they'll wait for the roll catch. And so what an even better player will do is they'll know this player's not going to panic roll. They're going to wait and expect a roll catch. So I'm going to wait even a beat longer so they can roll the roll catch and then I'll catch them. And that's where all these kind of cool mind games come in, where then if you're the other player and they're doing that, you can start attacking out a stun to keep them from mixing you up.
Yep, I was about to say that is one of my favorite little like very short mental mind games that happens. As soon as you get hit with the two-hit combo, what are you going to do after that? Sometimes it doesn't make sense, or sometimes it does, to just immediately respond with like two R1s of your own instead of rolling away because they're already preparing the roll catch. And I love that little interaction.
Exactly. And that to me is where a lot of the fun really starts coming from as you start improving at these games, is those mind games and trying to mix up your other opponent and download them. And in fact, one of the things I learned when I started playing these really top players, as I got better, when I would fight them, the first couple of fights, I would actually do okay. And sometimes I would even win one or two of the fights. But after 2 fights or so, then I would just start getting rolled. And I knew enough to realize what was happening. And that was I was too predictable. They were playing me for a few minutes, and that was enough for them to get used to my play style and what I would do in particular situations. And then they would take advantage of that and just run me down. So that definitely helped me grow too, because these top players, like they poke around and they find a weakness, and then as soon as they find it, they're just going to exploit it over and over and over.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So coming from DS2 to DS3, I think it's probably fair to say you weren't around the DS3 scene for a long time. Now, you made a lot of great content for DS3, but I'd say probably by the time of like Ashes of Ariandel, you were essentially done with the game. Did you even play Ring City? I don't remember if you made content.
I did a single playthrough of Ring City, like just one time, and then that was just a PvE experience, and then yeah, I was done.
Yeah, so what do you think it was that burned you out? Like, do you think it was just too much Souls for too long, or was it something specific to DS3 that you grew weary of?
It was, you know what it was? It was a bunch of different things. It was the combination of being a content creator, first of all, so I have to, make videos about the game almost every day. And the problem is, there's 8 trillion weapons in Dark Souls 3, but, 20 movesets.
Mm-hmm.
So it became to the point where, like, okay, I'm going to make a video on this curved sword that has the same moveset as every curved sword, but it has different scaling, so that's exciting. Like, it just, there wasn't enough different content to keep going, I think.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And, speaking of the content that you made, one thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was really interesting about what you were doing, like going back and watching those narrated thought duels, it's amazing how much of that content like still holds up and is really solid today. And the thing that I take away from that, especially maybe more than anything, I've seen so many videos like, okay, I'm going to show off the Lothric Knight Straight Sword. I'm going to show off this weapon. Okay, here's the moves. Here's the R1. Here's the R2. Here's the weapon art, etc. But I never found that type of content to be especially useful. But what you were doing, which was, hey, I'm just going to hang out and I'm going to summon randoms at Pontiff. And I'm going to play with this particular setup. And I'm not only going to show you the move set, but I'm going to show you which ones you should actually care about, which ones you should use in which situations. And I'm going to talk about the tracking of the R2 and why you should either unlock or not. And nobody else was doing that. In fact, I don't know that anybody else has done that since. Was there anything in particular that you were trying to accomplish with those narrated thought duels?
It was pretty much an excuse to act like I was streaming when I was not streaming. I think that's the best way to describe it. So I was still talking to somebody, but I didn't have anyone in my chat to talk to, so I just described what I was talking about instead. There was no, grand 5-head big idea or anything like that. I just wanted to talk about something, and what better than what I was thinking about while I was fighting.
Yeah. And you can obviously tell it's like stream of conscious. It's nothing scripted or anything like that, but the amount of solid content and observations that you pack into each of those is really astounding. Like I could probably sit down with any one of those weapons and like really think it through and think, okay, what would I want to showcase about this weapon? And probably not do a better job than you were able to do kind of off the cuff. I think which just spoke to your deep understanding of the PvP. It's really impressive.
let me insult myself and say the basics of the game though, they're so simple. I feel like it's not even worth like complimenting me about. It's just like, oh, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna R1 this guy but space him a bit better and then back off a bit, and that's basically all my videos just boil down to that, because that's, obviously there's a bit more to it, but it's not that much more to it. Like, do you agree or disagree that DS3 PvP in its fundamentals is very, very simple?
Well, a little bit of both. So I agree in the sense that the move sets are relatively simple, and as you mentioned earlier, not maybe as varied as we would like. But I would also say that out of that superficial simplicity emerges this really interesting complexity. Like, chess is pretty simple. There's not that many moves. There's not that many pieces. But nobody would argue that like to play it is simple. And I would say my attitude toward Dark Souls is the same, though I'm not trying to put it on the same level as chess. I think that framing is helpful when thinking about it.
See, I would say chess is simple. It's simple to play, but it's extremely difficult to master chess. And I didn't feel like Dark Souls 3 was like that. That's actually part of the reason I probably stopped playing just after about a year, because it got to the point, I mean, I'm sure the meta has changed now, and there's people that were better than we ever were, and I'm sure that's the case. But, the meta, like, even for tournaments, was just who picks the Karthus Curved Sword and who is currently better at spacing than the other guy. That's basically what it boiled down to, and someone would occasionally take out a Flame Spear. but that's basically all it was, and that was the pinnacle of high skill PvP. Every very notable member of the community would pretty much do the same thing, and it just got, I don't know, it seemed very uninteresting to watch.
There's definitely some truth in that, and who can space better, who can bait the other player into whiffing, so you can whiff punish them. Those sorts of things are true, and as you pointed out, the meta has changed, and we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what it's like now.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. And it was funny, actually, I heard you mention something about Estus canceling, so we're going to get to that as well. I've got way more material than we could probably ever fit in here, so I'm excited to get to as much of this as I can. But before we talk more about the meta, I'm curious about, we've talked about PvP in Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3. I don't think I've ever seen you play Bloodborne. Have you ever had a console to play Bloodborne?
Oh yeah, I love Bloodborne. I think Bloodborne's probably my favorite single player From experience out of all of them.
I completely agree. I think it's the best PvE game that From has ever made, and maybe one of the best of all time. But
I really wish they added PvP to that game. That'd have been so nice. Oh well.
I similar to Dark Souls 3, I'm not sure what I find so compelling about it. I'm not sure what I find so off-putting about the Bloodborne PvP, but I've never enjoyed the Bloodborne PvP.
I could not identify. You know what it was? After watching that game for like months and months, I could not identify anyone that was good at it. I don't know how to be good at Bloodborne PvP. It just seemed like it boiled down to just, for some reason, like the latency seemed even worse in Bloodborne. I don't know why.
I agree.
And then it was with the whole, everyone had 76 blood vials and they were incredibly fast, and everyone was just spamming attacks. It seemed like there was no rhyme or reason to it at all.
I agree with that to some extent, but I think part of that, at least in my case, is a personal failing to understand it. Like, I don't know if you know Scorched, but I would say he's probably one of the top players, and he has a great YouTube channel, and he streams, and he's made some interesting videos about Bloodborne. Now, I haven't cared enough about Bloodborne to like really dive into it and try to understand it. I think like the blood vials definitely I find off-putting. The chalice dungeons, and not only that they're there, but you pretty much have to grind the chalice dungeons if you want to make a build. And
for the best gems. Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Exactly. Like that whole gemming system, I think, was an enormous mistake, and I'm glad to see that they have not tried to bring it back.
You were so reliant on them. Like, it was more important than your stats almost, right?
Oh yeah. Because they stacked and they compounded one another, and so like the difference in AR between a well gemmed out weapon and one that wasn't, I mean, easily you'd be doing twice as much damage. It's crazy. Yeah. Okay. So I think it's funny too. I was in preparation for this conversation. I was going back and I was rewatching some of your old content. I was reminded of just how good it was. But I was also thinking about the meta and the way the meta's changed, and maybe even start with kind of a simple observation, which is parries. So if I know you didn't invade a lot in Dark Souls 3, but if I go back and I think about 2016, 2017, the absolute bog standard invader setup was small shield and straight sword. And you go for parries, and they were pretty easy to get back in the day because most of the people you were invading, they were noobs, PvEers. And you on the flip side, hosts almost never parried. The only time they go for a parry was some poorly thought through medium shield parry that was like a monkey see, monkey do parry that they'd go for, and they would always whiff. Now, look at 2021, and the situation is nearly the exact opposite. If you invade a gank, you can bet that at least one of them will have a parry tool out, and they will go for a lot of parries. And similarly, most reds will not go for very many parries, if any at all. And if they do, we'll talk about this in a minute, there's a specific way they tend to do it. They do not carry around full-time parry tools. At least there aren't many that do that. And I thought that was a really interesting thing that I think speaks to the cost of whiffed parries, where just you aren't landing them enough as reds to justify the risk. But because hosts have so much Estus, and they have the banking or the backing of the gank to prevent them from really getting punished for whiffed parries, they have all the incentive in the world to go for them, whereas the reds don't. And that's a big way that the meta has changed. But applying that to duels, I know back when you played, you would never see any serious duelist go for a parry, right? Like never.
Never, yep.
Yeah. That's changed somewhat. And I remember actually thinking at the time that I was watching you that maybe you hadn't thought this through quite correctly, where it wasn't a question of go for parries or not as a duelist. It was a question of like at the margin, how often should I be going for it? And the answer is not very often, but at least sometimes. And sorry, excuse me. Sometimes for a couple of reasons. One, people aren't expecting it, so the probability of landing it is higher. But also, two, to discipline the other person's actions and make them think twice, maybe about trying to press you too hard or swinging out of hit stun. And one of the big changes that's come to the meta, probably the biggest, is hard swapping. So probably when you were playing, the only people that hard swapped were like fishers, crit fishers, but nowadays it's become a solid, I would say almost fundamental part of the meta. And the swaps really, there's a couple of different ones, like hard swapping rings on the fly, like swapping a cat ring as you're falling through the air is a big one. Hard swapping to a parry tool. So like you're in hit stun, somebody's going to spam R1 because they don't see a parry tool. So you hard swap and bring it out for the third R1 and parry them, or even unequip your weapons and parry it. And then people might hard swap to a weapon for the riposte. But I think the most interesting one, people hard swapping to weapons for the weapon art. So if you don't have anything in your offhand, you only have your main hand weapon, and you hard swap to a weapon, when you come out of your menu, you'll have that weapon in just your main hand. But if you don't have anything in your offhand and you go for the weapon art, you'll do the weapon art of the weapon. So people will tend to swap to weapons like Lido because they'll bait like a hyper armor trade. Like I have a straight sword, you have a great sword. I walk up to you. I know you're going to be free swinging because you know you'll outpoise me. So then I hard swap to Lido, surprise Lido swap, and then trade that massive weapon art with your great sword. The other big one that you see a lot of is the Gundyr hard swap, where you go for the Gundyr charge, which is just an amazing.
I think this is such a good roll catcher.
Oh my god, it's to me it's kind of broken because it's got tons of hyper armor, it's got tons of forward movement and range, so you can't just like run or roll back, you'll get caught. If you try to roll through it, the sweeping mechanic of it
still hits you and you go backwards. Like the animation always looks so janky, but yeah, it still hits you. I remember that.
Exactly. Now there are ways to manage it, and if somebody goes for Gundyr charges predictably, you can backstab them. So there are counterplay elements, but it's still, in my view, it's pretty powerful. I mean, that's why everybody hard swaps to it. Like it's a common wake up. You backstab somebody, or you parry riposte them. And then as they're getting up, you go for the surprise Gundyr swap and charge. I think that's probably the most interesting way the game's changed.
Well, it's funny that you say that's the way the game's changed, because we were definitely hard swapping for day one. Maybe not in the same sense, like swapping to like a Gundyr's and then doing the weapon art, but there would always be like the life ring into some princess ring swaps, and then we would only have one weapon equipped at a time because we'd want to min max as much as possible. And we would never actually just swap weapons. It was always just going to the menu and equipping the other weapon, and we would do that right after combo. So I still remember doing that, but it seems like people have gotten more creative with it now.
Exactly, people have gotten more creative with it, and the timing and the speed with which they do it is much faster. People can, they have their inventory set up in a specific way, so they know, okay, one click up is this weapon, one click to the right is this weapon, and they can get in and out of their inventory in like, a quarter of a second, depending on what they're swapping to. Now, some swaps, obviously, that they go for less frequently, they're further away. It may take them a little bit to navigate to it. But it's really changed the meta because the only people playing are the tryhards. So ganks right now are harder than they've ever been to beat. And because you're unlikely to run into random ganks, they're coordinated, they're on mics, they're able to create complementary builds with each other. And it's just made the game, I think, far tougher for invaders.
I just wanted to comment. You talked about earlier how the whole incentive for parrying in invasions and stuff like that. I just had this experience in the Elden Ring network test, which was amazing. But I invaded somebody, and then there was the host. There was two phantoms, and then another blue phantom. I guess there's that type of covenant in the game as well. And I was against 3 people, and they did something I had never really seen before. They all ran up to me because, like when you're getting 3v1, you have to sort of like, hit and run. That's the only way you can really do it. And they did this thing where all they did was run up to me, and they would all just parry at different timings, and I couldn't ever hit them without getting parried. And it was the most frustrating experience because I didn't know what to do. I couldn't like backstab because backstabs are like completely broken in that game. So I just couldn't ever swing at them because they had a perfectly timed wave of parries, and I don't know, it just made me laugh when you talked about the whole host parrying kind of thing.
Well, it's funny because you're already hitting on a topic that we'll talk about here in a minute. We're going to get to Elden Ring and the backstabs. But yeah, I mean, and one of the points is that backstabs are an important counter to parry spam, and without that, there's almost no disincentive for parties to do exactly what they're doing, and you can predict it, and there's really not much you can do about it.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be as bad. I mean, like, they definitely need to fix the whole backstabs in Elden Ring, and if we want to get to that later, we can. But the fact that there's no two-hit combos as well makes it, I guess, even less punishing to try to go for parries. So it might incentivize more parries in actual fights between good players, but that's definitely speculation.
Yeah, but no, I agree completely with the train of thought, right? Like the less guaranteed damage you get on a whiffed parry, the less costly it is, the more value there is in going for parries, right? So I completely agree with
definitely.
that thinking. And in fact, you talked about how the meta's changed in DS3. One of the other big ways it's changed is around the glitches. So obviously, glitches been part of Dark Souls for a long time and in different ways, but I think there's an especially pernicious group of glitches. So you're already familiar with the Estus cancel. I'm actually curious to get your thoughts about that here in a second. There's the FAP glitch where you can equip and unequip the FAP ring to keep reset.
That's the stamina one?
Exactly. Yeah.
I've been trying to keep up, yeah.
Yeah. And that one's actually been around for a long time. It just never really gained any traction until maybe like the last couple of years. And then people use it on ladders to keep you from kicking them off, which is, especially fun mini game to play. And the other, there's the bow glitch, which is actually kind of difficult to articulate exactly what it does. It's kind of like it allows you to take the movement type of one thing and impose it on another. So you can take the repeating crossbow and impose its move on like a great bow. So you can turn the great bow into a machine gun and effectively just like one shot somebody. And it's not one shot, but once you get hit by one, you're in stun lock and it takes you from full health to zero.
Okay, those types of glitches, are they supported in tournaments or are those types of things banned?
They're banned, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so, and it's funny because in fact, one of the glitches I'm going to tell you about, it was a duelist who made a video about it. Well, of course, duelists are largely unaffected by these types of things, but as invaders, it becomes a huge deal. So bow glitch is one of those things you have to worry about. It's somewhat manageable, but probably the nastiest glitch right now, which I've actually personally known about, I'd say for 3 years now, and there were a handful of people in the community that knew about it, but we all kept our mouths shut about it because we knew if it got out in the wild, it would be awful, and that's exactly what's happened. So it's the unscaled glitch. Are you familiar with that?
The unscaled. Go on. I might know, but go ahead.
Yeah. So essentially, if you're like, let's say level 120 and you summon in,
is this like summoning a friend with the, and then the fact that they don't scale down properly?
That's exactly right. So you summon in your 802 level friend. The game will normally scale you down. It does it poorly, but it would at least do it. It allows you to completely bypass the downscaling. So you hit like a truck and you take way less damage, and obviously makes you much harder to kill. And so that's become a popular glitch among hosts and phantoms, especially like
that was
Pontiff.
One of the worst parts that I really hope people would not realize. You could summon a max level character, basically anywhere, and since physical absorption rises with your actual level, I guess that's the part they didn't account for. You would just hit them like you have a noodle in your hand. It was awful.
Yeah, and it's awful when the scaling, when the game does the scaling, but if you use the glitch and you bypass the scaling, it's even more nightmare.
Wait, so you can use this without having to have a friend summon you, or how does that work?
No, so you do have to be password summoned. You do have to be password summoned for the glitch to work, but it will completely bypass the scaling. And in fact, when your 802 friend comes into the world, the other players won't see like the blue icon that indicates that somebody's above level and have been downscaled. So you just bypass all of that, and you're hitting like a raw 802 player and taking damage like a raw 802 player. And at meta, at SL120, the difference in soul levels, the difference in damage output is pretty big, but it's at least somewhat manageable. If you get down to like soul level 60 and below, when people do that, they're almost unkillable. and they can like three shot you with a straight sword even if you have like twinked health. So that has made the game definitely a lot less fun.
It seems to be there's no way to bring that to actual duels, right? That's just an invasion thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, you could bring it to duels, like if you were like doing a fight club or something, you could summon your friend as an unscale.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. So and unfortunately, it seems like I don't know about the unscale one specifically, but I know all the others are present in Elden Ring, which means that From really hasn't been paying attention over the last couple of years to what's been going on, which is kind of disappointing. I'm really hoping they get all these fixed.
Yeah, I don't know. They've never really prioritized PvP, and maybe that's what's one of the most lovable parts about it for some reason. But yeah, it seems like that's always been very secondary to their PvE, so I can't blame them, but it still sucks.
Well, to me, it's not even that it's secondary, because if you look at the patch history for Dark Souls 3, they fixed a lot of PvP defects and did some balancing. The problem that I have is like essentially by the Ring City, they were done. So they didn't patch the game any further after that. I would have loved to have seen them take like some telemetry data and balance weapons, fix glitches, etc. But I mean, they've got a long track record of not doing those things, so it's safe to say it'll be the same in ER.
Yep, that's part of why we love and hate it. I mean, sometimes half of the combat revolves around knowing how to abuse the jank of From Software games. So that's what we got. We got to deal with it.
Yeah, quite right. So you mentioned the Estus cancel specifically in, I think, your Elden Ring video in one of your more recent videos, and I'll have links to your channel in that video and a couple others we talk about, so people can go watch it. But were you familiar with the Estus cancel already?
Yes, I was familiar with it. No one really ever did it, though. I guess people were sort of learning about it kind of as I was stopping. But yeah, I was aware of it. It just was not a widespread thing, like, at all.
So it was a thing even back when you were playing?
I've seen people, I've seen people on, God, was it Discord? Yeah, I saw people talking about it. I don't know if it was quite this, I guess it was the same method. I had never actually done it myself, but people were talking about, like, having the animation time of their actual Estus, so I assume that's what they were talking about.
That's really interesting how some of these things were discovered many years ago and for whatever reason never took off, and then in the last few years they have. What's your take on Estus cancel, like in terms of the game impact?
Well, it's kind of an interesting discussion because on the one hand, invasions are pretty stacked against the invader in Dark Souls 3 and seemingly Elden Ring as well. By no small measure, it's every factor is sort of stacked against you. The only thing that you have is that you are possibly more prepared than the host in you're invading, but as you said, it's probably not the case that much anymore. You said it's mostly just like kind of tryhards on the other side now, so now it's really, really against you. So part of me is like, okay, let's give the invader like something they can do to perhaps help them out, but nothing is stopping the actual hosts and their phantoms from doing the same thing, right?
Quite right, and that's exactly the issue I have. So, like, if you as a red, like as an example, you invade a solo host and they're Estus canceling, I mean, you're already at an enormous disadvantage in terms of their resources. And Estus cancel effectively makes heals unpunishable. I mean, with some exceptions, like you can guess and get like a lucky backstab here and there, but in general, you can't punish them. So you're essentially forced to run that player through all their Estus, all 10 of their Siegs, and their blessing, all the while doing that with like half the resources. So the degree to which you have to outplay the other player to get a victory in that situation has gone up substantially.
Yeah, that's why I remember one of the best things you can do to win, like, a 3v1 or something like that, and it's pretty much what everyone did, which is parry and then Hornet Ring backstab with something that's going to one-shot a phantom and thin their numbers, because you can't win that war of attrition unless you massively outplay them, because they have, 3 times as much SS as you. It's sometimes too much to ask.
Exactly. And that as that parry as a strategy has fallen to the wayside because of increasing skill on the other side, well, that's, I think, part of the reason people have been more receptive. Like, I mean, there's a selection effect, right? Unless you're willing to do what it takes to win, you're going to get burned out. You're going to get discouraged from invading. So the people that continue to do it are the people that have found ways to win. And they're the people that are willing to go to, ends of the earth in terms of skill development in order to be successful. And I think, the idea that everybody would learn something like hard swapping was probably unthinkable like 3 years ago. And now it's pretty much routine.
Yeah.
Similar to, and maybe we can talk about ER here a little bit. Backstab fishing in Dark Souls 3, it took off in popularity probably around 2018, 2019. Now it's pretty common. Most invaders will know at least some basic fishing techniques. Some of them are very good at it. G9's interesting in that he's brought it to like the tournament scene. Like you start to see some of those things in tournaments when he started playing that I never used to really see before. So in Elden Ring, it seems like the backstabs are broken, and I don't know exactly the way that they're broken, but what it looks like is, DS3 had that 2 check system. The first time, am I at their back? And then like half a second later, are they in range? What it looks like to me is that range of that second check has been reduced to the point where unless you're literally standing right next to them, that it's not going to go through. Is that your take?
Yeah, it also seemed like the direction was significantly more important. Like you could still face stab someone in Dark Souls 3. Like you'd flip their model around as soon, like if you got the confirm, it didn't really matter at that point as long as they were in range. But now in Elden Ring, they have to continue facing that same direction, and your actual blade, the pixel, has to hit like their centered lumbar like spine. It's so specific, the positioning now, that it's like it's unrealistic to ever really expect to get one now.
Yeah, in fact, what I saw in the network test was unless the other player was holding completely still for the entire duration, that you would not get it.
Even if they were standing still, like finishing a very long animation, you still wouldn't get it.
Right.
I didn't know how to backstab people at all. Like, I don't think you can even backstab people casting certain spells.
Correct.
That might just be an intended mechanic, but I don't know how to punish some of this stuff because you just slap them and that's it.
I don't think it's an intended mechanic, only because it causes like literally every backstab to whiff. And of course, that's even worse for somebody than no backstabs at all, because it constantly puts you in this situation where you're whiffing backstabs.
Oh yeah, good PvPers will use that to their advantage. Like they will actually intentionally bait the backstab. That even happens in Dark Souls 3. They will like kind of show their back to you for a second just to get you into that whiff animation, and then they'll punish the whiff animation.
Exactly. In fact, there's some players in Dark Souls 3 that are actually so good, they will bait the backstab and then move out of the second check range and then parry your backstab whiff.
Oh, you can do that? I've never tried that. That's actually awesome.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I played against a guy by the name of Namf, who was one of the best players I've ever played, and he was doing that to me consistently. Like, he would bait me into a backstab attempt and then parry the backstab, the whiffed backstab.
God, see, that's so risky to me because you need to know the latency of the person you're going against for that. That's, I guess in duels, that's a lot safer, where you can, like, safely kind of test that. But in random invasions on, like, that's risky to me.
See, to me, it's safer in invasions because if you mess it up, you can heal away your mistakes, because the goal is always to get that big blast to keep the other guy from getting to their flask entirely. So to me, the incentives are even stronger to do things like that in invasions.
Yeah, good point.
All right, so, I mean, obviously you played the network test. I was really glad to see that you were around for that network test. I was really pleased to see that video drop from you. Do you think you're going to make content for ER?
Oh, yeah, definitely planning on it. I would like to, play it as long as humanly possible. It seems like it's probably going to have more variety than Dark Souls 3, so hopefully I'll be able to stick around for a couple years.
Good. And are you intending to play on PC?
Yes. I have played like all the Souls games on both. I'm gonna get it on both, to be honest, so I can play with viewers from whatever platform. But I've found on PC the combat to be a bit smoother, and I don't know if that's because of frame rate or maybe less people are on Wi-Fi like from console. But I just always found the average duel to be a bit less laggy on PC, so that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. What about like the cheating problems of DS3, and have you kept up with what's been going on the last couple of years?
I haven't kept up with it, but I mean, that's just always been a thing. I mean, people have cheated in Souls games since Dark Souls 1 even, but what's going on now?
Yeah, so, I mean, to your point, cheating, it's always been there. Now, some people exaggerate its importance, but it's always been there. Well, I think a couple years ago, the part of the problem with the network model is that the Dark Souls 3 clients automatically trust each other, and they trust what they're being told across the wire. And so people figured out a hack where they could forcibly inject items into your inventory just in a network play session that would get you banned. So,
I remember that. I do remember that.
Okay.
Malcolm Reynolds. Yeah, I remember that.
Exactly. And so then From's response was to just stop banning people for injected items. It was like the lowest effort solution that they could find.
Oh, is that what they did? Oh man.
Yep.
Yeah, that is low effort. Oh man.
Yep. And so now it's kind of fortunately you don't see that as often. There's a pinned thread on the DS3 subreddit, but I don't see it getting as much activity. So I don't think people got the thrill of getting people banned and now they're kind of done with it. But some of the cheating strategies have evolved, and there's tools now, like there's a tool called Blue Sentinels. You pretty much have to run, honestly, these days if you play on PC. And it gives you a lot of interesting information. It gives you the ability to kick people out if they're cheating. And controversially, it has a feature where you can kick people out of your world if they're glitching. So people start Estus canceling, for example, you can actually use the tool to kick them out. But it only works if your team is not glitching. So if people on your team use glitches, then you can't kick the other guy out for glitching, though apparently there's some debate as to how effective this tooling is.
It's interesting because I would say cheating, this might sound weird, cheating has helped me more than it has hurt me in Dark Souls 3 because, you know, I would make videos every day and I was not going to make a new character every single day for, you know, this build. So I would just use Cheat Engine to basically reset my stats. I wouldn't give myself any advantage or anything like that. I would just save myself, you know, the grueling hours making a new character and getting to that point when you ran out of Rosaria respec. So that actually greatly aided my ability to test everything that I wanted to test. And I when I was PvPing, I would always have Cheat Engine open in case I ran into a cheater, because that was the only way to deal with it at the time. That I guess that Blue Sentinels thing did not exist. So if someone was, you know, flying around cheating and just, you know, one-shotting everybody, I would have like a curse dagger that would just hit them once and they would be cursed, and that would like go through a lot of the cheats. So it became like a cheating battle, which was strangely entertaining, but it was it was a mess. But I mean, it was still alright, I guess.
Yeah, and I remember actually seeing some of your fights. I think you were like hosting at Pontiff at one point, and somebody had turned off iframes against you, so you did the same thing back at them, some sarcastic applause. But that was always the tool, the cheat engine. But now there's even there's a tool called, I think it's Honest Merchant, and the idea is that at Firelink, there's a character that you can interact with, and it'll essentially sell you any item in the game for 1 soul. So you can buy all your weapons, you can buy soul packs, so you can upgrade your character. So essentially, you can create a brand new character and be ready to go with an SL120 build, fully kitted out in about 20 minutes. And then there's another tool called Wex Dust, which lets you invade anywhere in the game. It essentially, when you use the red eye orb, it essentially searches everywhere in the game for an invasion, which is good for variety.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it seems like they've implemented cheat engine things just with a user interface in the game now. That's actually really, really cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
And that's a great way of putting it. I agree. That's exactly what they've done. So going to Elden Ring, are there any features that have been maybe in previous Souls games that you'd like to see make a return? Are there anything in particular that you're going to be looking for?
Power stancing was the big one, and it seems like we're getting that. So that was one of my favorite things about Dark Souls 2. Other than that, returning features. It seems like Elden Ring is actually just taking the best features of all the games and sort of building on them more. I love that there are charged spells now. I've been wanting that for such a long time because actually, has this changed at all? Has magic in Souls PvP changed to be more useful, at least than it once was?
Probably not too much. I would say Lightning Arrow is kind of the one exception, because the problem with Lightning Arrow is that you can hold it indefinitely and you can poise cast it. So when somebody poise casts Lightning Arrow, it can be difficult to get in on them, especially when it's used in a gank. That can be really difficult to deal with. So one of the things that makes me a little wary of charging. I'm fine with charging as long as you can't charge it indefinitely. Just like Weapon R2, you have to let it go eventually. Is that the case in Elden Ring, or can you hold them indefinitely?
I don't. I only tested like 4 or 5 spells, and I could not hold them indefinitely. There were like, for example, the Glint Sword. There was like 3 stages of charge, and after the 3rd stage, it would just launch it. So I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, but I know a lot of the spells you can't indefinitely charge it.
Okay, that's good. I think that's the right trade-off, and I'm glad to see that. I think Dark Souls 3, the intent was maybe not for people to have just mages. It was intended to be more of an adjunct to a melee build, although there's some things in the game that made me think maybe that's not the case. It feels like that maybe more in Elden Ring 2, where even if you're a melee build, you can have some support spells to use as sort of a mix-up. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the spells, like even Crystal Soul Mass is now tied to like a weapon art in Elden Ring, so you can actually use that with just random weapons. You don't have to actually have the spell allocated. So it seems like they are trying to make that more accessible to non-mages as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So
Yeah, absolutely.
there are definitely some interesting things coming in Elden Ring. I think one of the more interesting, at least from an invasion perspective, I think it's called the Phantom Bloody Finger that lets you effectively kind of respawn.
Yes. I immediately thought that item was really dumb until I started getting 3v1 like 60 times in a row. And it was like, you know what? No, this is fair. This is fine.
Yeah, I'm a little conflicted because on the one hand, definitely those cases where you're getting run down by like a 3v1, you can totally see the utility of it and it seems fair in those circumstances. But I can also see the flip side, which is I can see it being a tool to just endlessly grief, especially I guess there wouldn't be solo players unless they're deliberately trying to be invaded. So I guess if you're always up against a gank no matter what, I suppose that kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
That was my justification in thinking it's okay, because the only people you're going to invade are ones using dried finger that are, wanting it. And then you probably wouldn't want to use that anyway, because then you're already at as even footing as you're possibly going to get in an invasion. So it seems like overkill there.
That's true. I mean, you wouldn't use it for a competitive advantage, but you could use it just to be an annoying ass. And that's where I could see, like, as an example, the whole idea of a host going through the fog to go to a boss. I know earlier games let you pull the host back out. But one of the things I also saw with that is I would see Reds kind of grief hosts where they would just stand by them. And if the host, try to attack, they'd just reaction roll it and kind of grief them. And then if the host tried to go through the fog, they would just, take maybe an empty fist and backstab them to pull them out, just to...
You could hold them hostage, basically, in their own single-player game, almost.
Exactly.
That was a problem.
Yeah, that is a problem. And I think that's why they got rid of it in DS3. That's why you can't grab people. At least that's my theory. So it'll be interesting to see how this item shakes out. Is there any restriction on it in terms of, like, number of uses per...
It gave you 10 in the network test. I don't know if that's going to be what you get or if that's an item that you just simply have to get separately. Maybe just for the network test, they just gave you them for free. We don't really know. We just know what it does.
True. Okay. Yeah. Good point. So if I look at what you're doing with your channel today, obviously you're not playing Souls at the moment. That'll change if we can call ER a Souls game. I think we can. But you've been playing a lot of Dead by Daylight, and I'll start by observing I am not a Dead by Daylight player. I've enjoyed your videos, actually. It's interesting to watch you kind of reason through the problems that the game puts in front of you or the patches and the balance issues. But one thing I was thinking about that kind of ties the Souls games together with Dead by Daylight is it's asymmetrical PvP, and there aren't many games like that. Like, I think Left 4 Dead, Back 4 Blood, or is it Back 4 Blood? I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
Dead by Daylight and like the Souls games, I couldn't really come up with another popular asymmetrical PvP game. Do you think there's anything sort of like inherently attractive to you about asymmetric PvP?
See, when I get into these games, it's not because of that, but it keeps happening. So I don't know if there is a reason. Like, the only reason I got into Dead by Daylight is because my fiance streamed the game. It was like, hey, try this if you're bored. I was like, okay, that's pretty much it. That's all the thought that went into it, and ended up hitting a lot of the same beats I liked Dark Souls for. So that is interesting.
Yeah, and I think from a balance perspective, symmetrical games are easy to balance. You give somebody a new ability, everybody's got it, so it almost balances itself. But these asymmetrical PvP games, man, they've just got to be a nightmare to balance.
I genuinely don't think you can balance them. I've never seen someone do it actually perfectly. It just seems like it's impossible.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And you're always trying to keep some element of rock, paper, scissors where no single strategy is truly dominant. There's always some counter to that strategy and a counter to that counter. And with all that in mind, I mean, you like you said, you can't balance those games. Do you think the lack of balance appeals to you in some way?
It is funny that pretty much every single game I played in the past 8 years has been horribly balanced. I went from Dark Souls 2, to Bloodborne, and then Dark Souls 3, and then I went to For Honor, and then I went to Dead by Daylight, and every single one of these games is badly balanced, but still extremely fun.
I remember in the early days of For Honor, and I don't remember the details, maybe you can fill this in, but there was some problem, and I remember there was a tournament that you were, I don't know if you were in the tournament or you were just offering commentary on it, but there was something really broken about one of the characters, and everybody in the tournament was doing it, and they all felt badly about it, but it was a tournament, so they were going to go for the best strategy they could. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
There's two possible things you can be talking about. There could be zone flickers or Shigoki's unlocked charge. Zone flickers were basically to do a zone attack, which is sort of like an AoE attack around you. You would tap heavy and light attack at the same time. But if you did them slightly off, like not at the same time, if you did the heavy attack first, the directional indicator would indicate a direction, the attack's coming from a single direction, but the zone attack would come from a different direction. So essentially, it would send false information to the opponent you're going against, telling them to block in the wrong direction, and then it would switch like in a tenth of a second. So it was extremely hard to react to for a lot of people. And then there was possibly the one you're talking about. Shigoki was this big character that he didn't have too much utility, but he did have this thing where he could knock people down if he ran into them while he was unlocked. And that's all like 2v2 tournaments became. It was just one Shigoki just knocking people down, and there was no combat. It was just people running in. It reminded me of Dark Souls PvP a lot. It was people running in circles and then just like running in to do an attack, and then it was the dumbest thing.
I think that must be the one, because I remember like people were really worked up about it, and even the people executing the strategy felt very badly about it. And I think that was really in the early going of the game.
Yeah, it was. Then they definitely removed that from what I've heard now. But at the same time, you can't blame them, right? If it's extremely effective and it's a tournament where you're trying to win, what else are you going to do, right?
Exactly. So this is kind of out of the thin blue, but this is something that I've wondered for a long time, and I don't know if you mind sharing it. What's the story behind your name, DamnNoHTML? Where did that come from?
This is. Do you mind asking how old you are? Is that a?
I'm trying to keep all my private details private.
Understandable.
So, yeah.
Okay. But back in a long time ago, there was this web browser game called Outwar. And it was basically it was a genius game where to level up, you would spread your link to other people. And that's how the game got popular, because you would have to essentially just spam links to everybody. But that was, I think, I don't even remember. It was 2004. It was a long time ago. But around the time I was learning HTML just for the hell of it, because I was bored. And so I tried putting HTML like coding in my name to see if I could make my name bold. And then I couldn't. So I said, oh, damn, no HTML. And then I just made that my name. It was really dumb, as all names like that have an origin story.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mine is pretty dumb, too. I won't burden you with it, but I kind of figured there would be...
Please do. I love hearing these stories.
So I actually don't think I've ever told this story before. So my name came... So I had this idea for a stupid website. So the idea was, and I don't know how familiar people are with Amish, but Amish, like especially in the U.S., live in the Midwest, and they kind of live like what would generally be considered a pretty simple life. They eschew a lot of like modernity, electricity, and it kind of depends on sort of what sect they're from. But they're not too far from here, and they drive like horse and buggies rather than automobiles. Anyway, the idea was it was going to be a technology review site that was run by Amish people. And the joke was they had no idea what they were reviewing because they didn't know electronics. And so they would give these really stupid reviews. And I had this whole idea, and I think I even maybe had a domain at one point. And so then I just chose it as my name. And then it just, like you said, it just sticks. And now I'm stuck with this ridiculous name.
Yeah, like once you've gotten like the notoriety with the name, you can't. Well, I say you can't change it, but I changed. I rebranded a while ago, so I did break out of it. It just took like 7 years.
But you don't go by DamnNoHTML any longer?
Nope, I just go by my full name now. That's how people know me.
That's so funny. It's so ingrained in my brain. Like when I search for your channel, I always just search DamnNoHTML. And of course, Google.
That's the thing. I had people come in my stream when I was playing the Elden Ring network test, and they were like, "Why is your name this?" Like they had no idea that I switched. So that's going to be something I'll have to deal with. People not actually remembering I'm the same person.
Yeah, see, but when I put this up on YouTube, I've got to put DamnNoHTML in the title. So I'm going to be doing my part.
It still sends you to the same place, so it's fine.
I'll further reinforce the DamnNoHTML meta.
All right.
Do you play any other games competitively currently? Like you obviously played Souls, you played For Honor, you played Dead by Daylight. Anything else that you're into?
No, not really. I'm actually kind of scratching for that itch right now. That's why I'm so excited for Elden Ring. But no, not at all.
Yeah, I've played a bit of Borderlands 3 lately, but definitely not the same sort of category of game. But it's something to while away the time until Elden Ring comes.
I couldn't get through Borderlands 3. I loved 1 and 2, and God, I even played through the pre-sequel, but I, for some reason, could not get into 3. Maybe the story or something? I don't know. The gunplay was great, though.
The gunplay is top tier. I think the gunplay in Borderlands 3 is some of the best gunplay I've ever experienced in a game. Like, the gunplay loops are great. The story, I agree, was nowhere near as good, especially as like Borderlands 2, but it was enough to kind of get me through the game. And I've had some fun in the end game with some of the farming and trying to build a super optimized tank that can just crush everything. There's a certain amount of fun in that gameplay loop.
Did you actually play Borderlands 2 a lot when it came out?
I played it. I played through a single time, and I played through the end game, I think, but I didn't do any of the raid bosses. Like, I didn't do any of the co-op. It was essentially just me playing.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
Did you do the raid bosses?
Yeah, I did them all basically once, all the invincible things. I mean, I don't know. It was still fun, but it just essentially just boiled down to just shooting at a thing's crit spot for 20 minutes until it died.
Exactly. And that's kind of where the end game sort of dies for me. It's like, it's fun optimizing your build. It's fun getting like the right weapons, but then it's like, well, what do I do with this? And just fighting a raid boss for me, it didn't really do anything for me.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's also why have you played Monster Hunter?
I have not played Monster Hunter, actually.
One of the Monster Hunters was, I think it was on PS4, maybe, like the PS4 Plus, the free game 4 or 5 months ago. And I tried playing it, man. I tried playing it for a couple hours. It just bored me silly. I don't know what people see in it.
Yeah, I had the same experience. I don't remember which one I played. I played some Monster Hunter for like an hour or two, and I was like, yeah, I don't get it. So all my friends said the game's amazing, and they said the same thing about Dark Souls, but I don't know, maybe in 6 months I'll be like, oh wow, this is the best game ever. But I agreed right now.
Yeah. So I want to make sure here, we're going to run out of time in just a minute. I wanted to ask you.
I'm good for like a little bit longer if you had more things to talk about.
Okay, right on. So the story of the open source subreddit, I was wondering if you could kind of share the journey there. I don't know if a lot of people know about the open source subreddit, but if you could kind of share how that came to be and sort of the events that went into its creation.
Yeah. So I posted this video of basically you could do the charge from a lance, the weapon art, or even just like a charge dart too from like a claymore, any like, big stabbing attack.
I forgot about that part. You could do this thing
where you could reverse the direction of it kind of at the end and make it more of a sweep rather than a stab. It was very situationally useful. It was mostly just a gimmick. It didn't do much, but I just shared it on the Dark Souls subreddit, and they banned me for that. And they said it was like a glitch, and then right above it there was like a sacred flame glitch. They one of the mods specifically did not like me. We've had history of just bickering back and forth, so they clearly made a very personal decision to ban me. And then I was like, all right, well, that's stupid. So I bitched about it on Twitter, and I was like, if you want to go complain to them, go for it, not realizing at the time that when you have followers, you can't say that. So I was totally in the wrong there. Like, even though I was just saying, hey, like, go tell them how bullshit this was. You can't do that when you have followers, because it just makes people, way too aggressive. It's, that whole witch hunt mentality. So then after that, I got permanently banned. And for that part, I was like, that's fair. I shouldn't have done that. But afterwards, I wanted to make a subreddit that, we could talk about, because, there are glitches in the game, and to pretend there are not glitches in the game is some weird, like, Orwellian 1984 shit right there. So I just wanted to, be a subreddit where you can just talk about whatever and acknowledge all the glitches, and even talk about how cheats might be ruining your game or helping, or, things to combat that stuff. Just all that stuff was okay to talk about.
Yeah, and it's funny because that same sort of mentality, and even though I don't agree with the decision to keep discussion of glitches off the DS3 subreddit, I can at least understand the mindset and what they're trying to do. So I can kind of respect it, even though I don't agree with it. But with the Elden Ring network test, where the network test is ostensibly there exactly to find and report these kinds of issues, they were actually deleting posts from users that were making posts trying to coordinate community activity, like, hey, here's the glitches I'm finding, let us know what the list is, we're going to get a list over to From, which I think is an enormous community service. They're actually having those pulled down, and I thought, okay, there's absolutely
They were?
Yes.
That makes no sense. That's the entire point of the network test. It's not even like people can ruin the game for others
Exactly.
because it's not out. That doesn't make any sense at all.
The only reason is this weird slavish devotion to quote the rules without really thinking about why the rules are there and what you're trying to accomplish. Like it was very disappointing to see. And there are a number of subreddits that other people have created. There's a new one, I think it's called From Software PvP, that's kind of cool. And then there's like Badman Red, I think, is another one. So there's some interesting subreddits around there, but there's a lot of coordination and focalness to the DS3 subreddit. So that's still by far the most popular one.
Huh. That's disappointing to see that it's happening in the Elden Ring one.
Yeah, and actually I remember you were an active participant in that subreddit back in the day. You used to post a lot of really good stuff on Reddit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed interacting with the community there.
Yeah, it's changed, unfortunately. Like the majority of the players there now are PvE players. So if you talk about like PvP, duels, invasions, etc., it's not a fun experience. In fact, if you ever are curious, you can kind of click on my profile and just look through the history of like the arguments I've had with people, the things people say to me. It's just kind of ridiculous.
I mean, I guess I understand it. It's probably just going to be more people like, hearing the game is fun from someone else and then having their first playthrough and going, wow, look at this screenshot of Earthel. It looks so pretty. And then that's more of what it is now than actual, hardcore discussions about the whole PvP.
That's exactly it. Actually, you nailed it. Like, I would say 60-70% of the posts are, look at this pretty screenshot. Look at this pretty thing I drew that's reminiscent of Souls. Look at this tattoo I got. Look at this boss I beat. I mean, and it's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm sure for you, it's this really exciting moment. You just beat this hard thing, but it just gets kind of tiresome when that's like all there is to these subreddits.
Yeah, there's only so many times you can see, I just beat, Soul of Cinder with, this weapon. Like, that's... I hate to say, like, don't have fun, but I also, on the other hand, are like, it's just the same thing for 4 years now. People making the same post.
Exactly. And I feel like a misanthrope when I keep feeling that way.
Me too.
But it's like, come on, man. Like good for you, really, but it's not really a thing for me to get fired up about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think do you think DS3 PvP is the best PvP that they've had in these games so far? Take Elden Ring out of the equation.
No, I think overall the best Souls game I would say is 3 for its combination of pretty good PvP and pretty good PvE, but I still think Dark Souls 2 had the best type of system where you couldn't roll 76 times, you couldn't just drink Estus, spin in a circle, and be okay. Like, those things were punishing as hell in Dark Souls 2. You could not really do those things without getting heavily punished, and I liked that. I liked that you could only roll 4 or 5 times. So it was not just, a bunch of attacks are coming in and you got to just, you know how it is. There's people just rolling 50 times in a row. I really dislike that about the more modern Souls games.
So I agree with you to an extent. I don't care for those sorts of things. I don't care for the fact that people can just spam roll, and especially if they're on a latent connection, it makes it really difficult to punish. But there's something about, and I don't know if it's like the pacing of DS3 that I find so compelling, so much more than 2. But here's something I was thinking about the other day. If I think about most Souls content creators, there's usually some sort of pattern where there's one of the games they start playing, they make content for it, they grow an audience, and then the next Souls game comes out. And almost every time, they don't like that new Souls game as much. They don't have as much success with it. Maybe they don't get as many views. You're actually one of the notable exceptions. I think most other content creators would get slotted in to the other category. And that actually has me a little bit concerned about Elden Ring, because it makes me think, like, if you love a game enough to be a content creator, that means that there's some special significance for that game for you, which almost means it's like peak experience, right? It's the outlier. And it almost suggests that any other game that deviates from that formula, you're going to like less, just because how can you like 2 games that much, right? Do you follow?
Yeah. Yep.
So do you share my concern at all that you'll feel that way when you keep playing Elden Ring, and that you just won't end up enjoying the PvP and you'll be done with it soon?
Um, I'm trying to remain optimistic on it. We don't I think we just don't know enough. Like there could be the same problem that Dark Souls 3 had, where 6 months in, I've done every single move set, I've seen every single thing that the game has to offer, and then that'll be it, and I'll have enjoyed my time there. But to make any speculation on whether it's going to go the same way as 3 for me, it's just way too soon to say. We have no idea.
Well, it's certainly true that we don't know enough to say definitively or based on things that are in the game whether we're likely to stick around or not. But I think reasoning more holistically and looking at experience with these other games, it is something that definitely concerns me. Like I've gotten so much enjoyment out of DS3. My fear is that I won't get nearly as much out of Elden Ring, though. I have to say, from a PvE perspective alone, Elden Ring looks like it will easily be the best game they've ever made. Better than Bloodborne, I think, just in terms of the diversity in the world and the way you can interact with it. I mean, I feel like, this is like Led Zeppelin 4 for Miyazaki, right? Just at the absolute
Yeah.
peak of his powers. And I'm super excited to get in there and see what they've got going on.
But you're still worried about the whole PvP thing because of how much you like Dark Souls 3 PvP?
Exactly. And what little of it I've experienced and seen sort of reinforces that. The bit about the backstabs definitely concerns me. I'm hoping that it's something that they're going to fix, but it's definitely something that concerns me. And it's just, I don't know, it's weird. It feels different and wrong, even though it is, like, if I'm being honest about it, it is still pretty close to DS3. I don't know. I think getting rid of the duplicate or the two hit stun mechanic.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. What do you feel about that?
Well, I think it increases the returns to skillful play, at least in a duel. But I think the hit stun also, it opens up an interesting sort of set of movements, right? Like if I hit you once with a straight sword, you're in hit stun, you can't do anything. It's more likely that I can panic you. But at the same time, if you don't have that, I hit you once, I know you can roll. It's so I can maybe chain roll catches together. It's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out. So in a duel today, let's say 10 R1s will kill you. I really only have to hit you 5 times because I get the other ones for
Right.
free. So in that sense, maybe it'll make duel outcomes less dependent on luck. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm looking at it in several different ways. I think removing the combo is a big removal to burst damage that you might need when you're getting severely outnumbered. So I think in that regard, in invasions, it might make that even worse. But I think in actual duels, it might actually make it a bit better. Because one of the main problems, at least with Dark Souls 3, was it was not very common to use an R2 of a lot of movesets because they did not combo and they, had significantly higher animation time. So it just boiled down to the most optimal thing was to just be properly spaced R1s and occasionally like a weapon art or something. But if they take that away, it seems like the value of R2s might go up because you're still getting only one hit, but it's going to do more damage and possibly more range if it's a stab or something like that. So it might actually increase diversity, but I'm not sure.
Well, it's funny because if you think about in DS3, let's say you have a choice between 2 weapons, a straight sword and an ultra great sword. Well, the argument for using an ultra is you're going to do more damage, but obviously it's harder to hit somebody. But if you hit them in DS3, you get to hit them twice. So, it effectively does even more damage than you would think just looking at the AR. But now there's no hit stun, and we of course don't know if that's true for all weapons, it seems safe to think so, then the difference in damage between, let's say, a straight sword and an ultra great sword is effectively lowered. So the motivation to go for something big and heavy because it does more damage, I think, is going to be reduced. I think it's going to have a big ripple effect, and it's going to be hard to figure out what all those effects are until people have had the game in their hands for 6 months.
Yeah, I think we're just in the hugely speculative stage. I'm very curious to see how it's going to turn out. Yeah, it really could go either way. I am like a little concerned about the speed of duels, like, because really, like, the way you put it in Dark Souls 3, like, weapons basically do twice the damage that they actually do, because you're always, if you hit the first one, you're obviously going to hit the second one. But it seems like, do you think it's going to slow down fights quite a bit?
I don't know, maybe, because it also seems like it reduces the incentive for the first mover, right? Because But at the same time, then it also reduces the incentive to avoid getting whiff punished because getting whiff punished won't be as costly. So I don't know.
Right.
Like I could see it going both directions. It'll be interesting to see, and all the weapons and the diversity of move sets and the weapon arts that you can move around. I think that's a really cool feature.
Oh yeah, I'm loving that. The whole weapon arts being tied to an item you equip to your weapon now, I think is going to make a lot of very interesting things happen. Like, I don't know what this was. There was some weapon art in the network test that's like this giant, huge lunge. It's such a long range attack, and someone had it on like a straight sword or something like that. And I did not expect that at all. So there's going to be a lot of times where we're in a fight not expecting a weapon art to be tied to the weapon that they're actually using, and I think that'll be really cool for catching people off guard.
I agree. And it's funny because Dark Souls is mostly a game of public knowledge. You can look at somebody's build, you can see what they've got equipped, and you can know what they're capable of. But this adds an element of private knowledge, like to your weapon art, where you can't tell just by looking at the player what they're capable of doing exactly, which I think, frankly, one of the downfalls of Dark Souls 3 is that maybe it's too reactable. And I think having some elements of things that you can't just react to would be good for the game.
Yeah, I can imagine you having like three of the same weapon, but each of the weapons has a different weapon art, and you can just swap between them and just constantly keep the opponent on their toes. So stuff like that, I'm already looking forward to.
Agreed. And that's not the first time I've heard somebody suggest that you could have copies of the weapon with different weapon arts equipped to just keep mixing people up. I think that could be very interesting to see.
But yeah, we're still very much in the speculative stages now. I just want to be excited about it. I've been looking forward to Elden Ring for years and years, so I'm gonna be optimistic about it.
Well, man, it was tough because they made that announcement in 2019, I think it was, and everybody
Yeah.
was all fired up, and then literally nothing, like not even just a hint of anything from, not even like a vague tweet or a screenshot, and that was tough. Like I think, and it went what 2 years until we heard something more
Yeah,
solid.
I don't know if you went to the Elden Ring subreddit in between, but it was basically just like hollow to people just saying like it doesn't exist. It was such a sad thing to see. But I think that's why everyone is so excited now, because this is by far the most hyped game that they've ever had. So
Yeah, yeah. I think we're gonna have to wrap up here in a minute, but before we do, I want to make sure I give you an opportunity to talk about something. So you mentioned something in one of your most recent videos, the one about Elden Ring, and you talked about something about creating your own narrative in the process of invading. And I thought you articulated a point really well that I've struggled to put my finger on, but I think you called it out. Do you want to talk about that for a minute?
yeah, it was the whole experience where, when you invade in Dark Souls 3, you're invading like a playground. You're blocked off here, you invade, and this is your area. When you invade in Elden Ring, though, I haven't seen like if you can invade in the dungeons, maybe those are blocked off, but in the overworld, it's just you just invade in the world. It's just the entire world is open, and you just start an adventure, basically trying to kill the host. And it turned into these like I call them like they were stories, because I would invade somebody, I'd see two people, we'd gesture, and then I'd pepper an arrow at them, and then they'd fight something, and then I'd be gone, and then a couple minutes later I'd come in and I'd try to ambush them, and then we would have like this tale that went on for like 30-40 minutes. And that's actually why I kind of like the whole phantom ringer finger thing too, that lets you reposition, because I think that's more along what Miyazaki wants invasions to be like. They want you to not necessarily just have a bow honor duel when you invade. They want you to be like an adversary, like a nuisance that plagues their adventure. And that is the feel I got. It's a very different feeling tracking people across a giant open field as they're just walking throughout the world. And I thought that was a very special and like new experience I had not gotten in Souls before. And that is what I'm looking forward to a lot.
Very well said. And I agree with you in the sense of the broader open world and the experience that you get there that you couldn't get in Dark Souls 3. But the bit about the narrative, that to me was one, especially early on, a big attraction of invading, is that it was always different, and different in ways that I struggle again to articulate. But like I always felt like there was a new story being created, and I could, and then that was part of the attraction to making videos, because I could kind of document what had happened to me, and it's like, oh, look at this cool thing that happened, this one in a million thing, and this person fell off the cliff, and never again will I have that same experience in an invasion. Like they would always be so different and so varied, and there's no mechanic like invading in any other game. And they give you generally the tools for invasions very early in the game, and I think that's a hint from software that this is something you should try. But there's, I would say probably 90% of players will never even try invasions. Do you think that's about right?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, you know, you and I will talk about like, oh yeah, we're going to be invading all the time and stuff like that. But then if you actually go to like the Reddit on release, 99% of people don't care about that. They just want to play with their friends, get through the game, and that's probably all they'll ever do. And we are definitely in the minority, the people that want to keep invading and keep PvPing. But the minority is still a lot of people. It's just so many people will play this game, but I think very few will stick with the PvP. But that's kind of how it's always been.
Yeah, I agree. I do wish there was something that we could do to incentivize more people to invade, because one of my favorite post types that I see on Reddit, you know, it's something like, I never used to invade. I always thought it was just for griefers. I tried it for some random reason. And oh my God, I can't believe how amazing this mechanic is. And I wish more people could have that experience, and then in turn be able to be a voice of reason on the subreddits and explain like, look, we're really not here to grief you. That's not the point, at least not for most of us.
Of course.
Yeah.
Do you remember in any Souls game the first time you were invaded?
Oh yeah, absolutely. In fact,
Tell me the story.
well, and I'll tell you the story. It was so formative, and it's something I always think about when I invade, which is I may be creating that experience for somebody else that they will remember maybe for the rest of their lives, and of course I'll never know, but like that power and that influence I always thought was kind of cool. So it was in Irithel Dungeon, and I remember, and this was before I did any PvP, it was in Dark Souls 3. I got invaded, and I remember I tried to hide, and the invader had like walked past me, doubled back, and I remember like I think I had, it was one of the exile. I think I had the exile curve greatsword, and I was probably spamming it, and I didn't understand what happened at the time, but all of a sudden my character stopped moving, and the opponent, like, I remember describing it as like he laid me on the ground, and of course he had riposted me, and I think he had a dagger, did a ton of damage, and I tried to get away to heal, and of course he killed me. But I remember thinking like, what just happened there? That was this really strange experience. Like, it didn't bother me that much. I didn't get upset about it, but it made me really curious. And then I think I went on YouTube and I started dueling. And actually, this is the story of how I found your channel. I was dueling, and I remember thinking like, how do I know when I should swing? Like, there's probably good times to swing and bad times. I knew nothing of melee combat. And that's actually when I found your channel and started learning about the combat. Yeah, do you remember your first invasion when you got invaded?
Oh yeah, it was. This is when I fell in love with the game. It was my second actual attempt at playing Dark Souls 1. I was with my friend on Discord, and I was in. You played Dark Souls 1, right? Yeah, I was playing. It's the area before Gaping Dragon, the whole sewers, and I was getting to one of the bonfires, and then the bonfire wasn't lit, and I asked my friend, like, hey, what's wrong with this bonfire? Do I have to do something? I was like, it's not lit. And then he goes, oh no. And then that was the first time I got invaded. And then the invader comes around the corner, and I was like, wait, what is this? Is this a player? Because like I didn't even know about that.
Right.
And then the guy started what ising me, and I was like, oh shit, this is it. And then I walked out, and like, you know, those things that drop on your head and like they suck on your head in the sewers. I walked out and immediately got killed by one of those things before I could fight him. But man, that like adrenaline feeling of the bonfire stopping and then knowing something bad was about to happen, that set the tone for me. I was like, this is a very unique experience.
Exactly, and it's so intense. But let me ask you a question. What was more intense, the first time you got invaded or the first time you invaded somebody else?
I would say for me, the first time I got invaded, because of the whole ominous bonfire going out. It was like a story. It's like I saw it go away before my eyes. It was like someone orchestrated that. I would say that was more of like a horror element, but the adrenaline element was definitely my first cracked red hour for sure. I don't remember that one though. It was an Isolith, but that's all I remember.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I don't remember mine exactly either. I remember like about that time and what I was doing, and I was rocking a really sweet build. I think I was rocking main hand Yorms and offhand bucklers, so you know I was serious.
Yours is not bad for an ultra great axe. I actually kind of like that thing.
Yeah, that the stun on that, like the ground shake, is pretty valuable. Yep. I'll tell you, it reposted people pretty well, because that's pretty much what I use it as, that reposting engine. Man, those were heady times, though. Those early invasion days where like phantoms would just spam rolling attacks at you. Like, it was such a playground for invaders. It was so easy to win invasions back then. Actually,
I remember the early days. Everyone was complaining about the dark sword because it was just a long straight sword, and people didn't know how to counter that yet. So that was everybody universally was complaining about that. Meanwhile, everyone that was super serious about PvP had already discovered like stock turtling and Karthus curve sword and all that stuff. But oh my god,
yep,
those are fun times.
they were. In fact, I've got some of my first invasions. They're unlisted. Actually, somebody found one. It was unlisted. Actually, I don't know. Somehow the link got out. Maybe it wasn't unlisted, and I started getting a bunch of funny comments on it. But I should put together some like my early fights and maybe try to make something out of that, because it's pretty weird to go back and watch.
It's pretty entertaining to view yourself when you didn't really know what you were doing. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Scott, man, it's been a real privilege to talk to you. It's honestly kind of strange to be sitting here talking to you, the guy I learned so much from when I started playing, and I'm really excited for Elden Ring. I'm excited to see you playing Souls games. I'm excited to see you making content. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much for coming by today.
I gotta say, right back at you, man. You were very well spoken, and I look forward to watching your stuff on Elden Ring as well.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Take care of yourself, man.
Yeah, no problem. Yep, you too, and thank you for this nostalgia trip. It's made me all fuzzy feeling, so thanks,
Good
man.
deal. Later on.
All right, have a good one. Take it easy.